Good day, everyone. Yes, we are finally getting this video for our theories and techniques class. So we'll be looking at personal values and the counseling relationship. So we're going to be focusing on ethics, beliefs, and values. Now picture this. The question is, who will you invite to dinner? A mom of two with drug addiction, homeless man with alcohol dependence, person with schizophrenia who is not on medication, a man charged with felony or domestic abuse, a famous politician, a person who makes racial slurs on public camera. You have to decide now, who will you invite? And you only get to pick one. Now, your moral values or dilemma basically is where you stand. So this one says, you have been seeing a client for a couple of months who you are aware makes her money as a prostitute and also deals drugs. You feel you have developed a therapeutic connection with this client. One day after the session, as she is handing you the payment for the session, she asks, how does it make you feel taking the devil's money? You know, drug and John money. How would you respond to the client? And different persons might have different responses. It's about your values. Would you continue to take her payment? And I want you to identify personal values that make this situation difficult for you. Might be a religious client. Listen to this scenario. A deeply religious woman has come to you for therapy. On her first visit with you, she discusses her religious beliefs and asks if it would be okay if you would begin each session with prayer. How do you respond to this client? Would it make a difference as to which religion the client is affiliated? And identify any personal values or beliefs that you hold that would influence your decision. So let's pretend that this person is a Muslim, for example, and wants to do their Muslim prayer. How would you feel about that? Some other tough topics when it comes to values: abortion, pro-choice or pro-life. And pro-choice is the mother getting the priority. Pro-life is the child getting the priority. The right to die, including assisted suicide, or otherwise called euthanasia. Gay marriage legalization. We know how some persons feel about this. Divorce, is it always a poor decision? And we know in Open Bible we have different beliefs on this, so based on the Constitution, different discussions over time. Capital punishment, for or against. Do you have values or beliefs that may be difficult to keep out of client sessions? Because you might have some things that really you strongly believe, because remember, your values are things that are important to you, and how possible is it to keep them out of the session? Now, Pope and Vasquez say awareness of the ethics code is crucial to competence in the area of ethics, but the formal standards are not a substitute for an active, deliberate, and creative approach to fulfilling our ethical responsibilities. Perhaps the most difficult deliberations involve conflict between the law and the therapist's deepest values. Now we're going to look at the difference between principle ethics and virtue ethics. Principle ethics talk about the rules that are there, what I should do. The virtue ethics talk about the guidance, who I should be. Right? So different persons view things differently. Now, if somebody comes to me and I'm going to apply principle ethics, it means that whatever the rule is, that is what I'm going to do. So for example, as a guidance counselor, a child might have been referred to me who was in a fight. When I investigate, this child has not eaten for 2 days. child is hungry and the child was provoked. But the rule says if the child is in a fight, they're supposed to be sent to the principal to get suspended. Do I stick to the rule, which would be my principal ethics, or do I use my virtue ethics and ask myself, what do I believe is the right decision? So that's the difference between principle and virtue ethics. Now, core beliefs affect how we view the world. Personal and professional philosophies and choices. Now, those our own choices. Personal biases and values. So whatever your beliefs are will give you some biases. There are going to be some things that you are more comfortable with than others. Your core beliefs are chosen freely. Nobody can force them on you. And whatever actions you do on your beliefs will have a pattern of consistency and repetition. So that's how you can know that this is a core belief, right? And there are different views on how people change environment, and you have the nature nurture debate. Nature talking about what happens because of birth and in heredity, and nurture talking about our environment and how they impact our experiences. Now, our behaviors are determined by our beliefs, a result of our self perception, right? And some persons, you might have clients who are conflicted in this area, different persons, because you have different perceptions of self. And Carl Rogers, which is a theorist we'll look at further in the course, he talks about the ideal self and the real self. And so persons will have different perceptions. Your outward indication of values. And this is important for us to say outward because, for example, yes, let's use God or education. For God, a number of persons, if you're asked to name your top 10, God would be number one. But do our beliefs, do our actions, our outward indication show that we always put God as number one? For education, there are some students who will say that, yes, education is my number two or my number three priority, but everything else gets. They go to parties, they go to different things and don't do as well, even though they say. So the outward indication is what the real values are. Right? So this says give an example of a behavior you could observe and have an indication of what one might believe or value. And we just gave two examples. Who do you obtain values from? Your parents or family? You grow up in a family, you grow up whether these are biological parents or not, they have some influence on you. So there are some things that without even realizing you do because a parent or an adult in the family that you grew up with did. Right? I know some of you might be parents now or aunties or uncles and you might be wondering. So different persons, different perspectives, right? So if family, you might be thinking, oh, I do this the same way like my mother, you don't even realize. Probably somebody might come to you and say, oh, it's the same way your mother used to do it. Or peers, or friends. That is why we must be careful which friends we keep and the persons we keep around us. Because whether or not we realize they do have some impact on how we relate to persons and how we do things. Some might have less impact than others. Our teachers, our schools, our education, even now after this program, this course, there are some things you will look on differently and that might impact your values in different ways. Politicians or government, some persons don't want anything to do with politics, while some persons there's not a green or orange drum that knocks that they are not there. Church or religious beliefs. And I know our values here are strong because of where we are, organization we're a part of, and it shows that the fact that we want to do a program like this, that we want to do more for God. And so we know that values would be strong here where it comes to our church and religious beliefs. But remember, for some persons, the church or religious belief don't have to have anything to do with God. Don't mix it up. You have some persons who work in church, they don't have any personal devotion, they don't have any time for God. They're so busy working in church. So we have to be careful of that. Media. How much time you spend on social media, how much time you spend watching television, those say a lot about your values. How much time you spend reading where literature is concerned, say a lot about your values, and your personal experiences impact your values in different ways. Now, values and beliefs of culture. So there are some values and beliefs of culture that you don't even realize the impact they have, like family or child rearing practices. Some of these things we don't realize how they impact us. A parent that used to hug you, we are going to be looking on Erickson's psychosocial stages and look at how different care practices impact children and how they trust or mistrust, how they believe in themselves. Social customs, your community, your work, these things impact your beliefs, even your level of trust and how much you push for doing certain things. Religion, spirituality, life, death, persons who were around us who are not anymore, eye contact, body language, physical contact, these things are also impacted by different things, experiences that we've had. So you have some persons who have no problem with eye contact, while you have some persons who can't deal with it at all, right? Some persons who also physical contact is a big issue for them. Food and different rituals also impact our values. Healthcare. You have some persons who, as soon as they feel a little pain in even their fingernail, they run to the doctor. While you have some persons who believe in natural healing and so different things for different persons. Now, most of the culture is below waterline. Basically, what is below the surface ebbs and flow. So you have to dive below the surface to find the deepest values, right? So what is it that is below your waterline? What is it that is just not evident right away, but you know that it's there, or you can, if you think about it, you know that because of that way of life, because our culture is our way of life, that way of life causes you to behave a certain way, act a certain way, have certain expectations of persons. Probably you grew up with somebody who was a perfectionist or somebody who didn't believe in like making mistakes or didn't believe in the place being messed up at all, or so different things impact us in different ways. Now, this is actually the most important part of the culture, is that which is hidden and internal. The most significant part, however, is unconscious or below the level of awareness and includes values and thought patterns. So even our thought patterns impact the way we are. Values and beliefs and influence. Where and if outside help is sought, people differ how they experience pain. I can tell you, my father had an accident and we took him to the hospital and he was there talking and you realize he wasn't comfortable, but of course he had just had a fall from a great place and fell in a ditch somewhere and he had to get help to take him out. And he was there and talking with everybody. And the doctor asked him what was his level of pain between 1 and 10, 10 being the highest. And some persons were quite surprised when he said he would say probably 8 or 9, which means he's experiencing a lot of pain. That some persons experiencing that level of pain would have been balling down the place and, tearing up the hospital, and so that. So different persons differ how you label symptoms, how they communicate the symptoms, their beliefs about the cause of the symptom, attitudes and expectations towards therapy or treatment differ. Now, when personal and professional values dance, values determine why we choose our profession. Now we chose our profession, our choice of therapeutic modalities, our view of how people change. Let's go back to how we choose our profession. There are things that, as you said, values are things that are important to you, things that you value more than other things. And so there are some things that are not important. There are some persons that believe they have to be around people, and so they will choose jobs like teaching, working in a bank, with being like teller. They don't want to be the one around the back working with the computers, and so there are some persons who value their time alone. So your values do determine how you choose your profession. Your choice of therapeutic modalities view how people view of how people change. So even you now, if you choose to go further in counseling, to do further training where you are actually doing sessions with persons, I like Carl Rogers. I believe he represents a lot of what I believe in, his modality. There are some persons who like the reality modality where you confront the person. So different persons choose different things. There are times when I see a need for another modality, but I like to use Carl Rogers. And so that's determined by my values. Populations with whom we choose to work also. There are some persons who prefer to work like with the poor persons in the ghetto and that, right? It might be based on a belief or personal experience. My mother used to be a teacher right before she retired, and she used to prefer to teach the slowest grade 1 or grade 2 because it felt good for her to know that she brought them from not reading to reading, while another person might want the very fast persons who are moving quickly and can move the class along. And some persons feel frustrated when they have the slow children who you're not achieving a lot with, right? So different persons, the interactions with clients and other professionals, how you basically interact with persons has a lot to do with your values. So there are some persons who prefer to wait to be introduced, but there are some persons who believe that, boy, I have to get my networking in. So that's determined by your values. Developing your awareness of cultural values. Be sensitive to and acknowledge and confront differences directly. Ask questions. Talk with colleagues of different race, sex, age, sexual orientation, religion, regional origins, etc. Examine your own biases and fears. You are never a blank slate. And those who did the introduction to psychology course would know the other term, tabula rasa. Now, you have to be sensitive, and the sensitivity with all we just talked about here is the most important part. Because if you're not sensitive, you can cause people to feel hurt. So it's not just what you doing, what you believe in, why you do this, why you do that. You know when to say something, when not to say something, and when you do say something, you know what to say. But you need to examine why you're saying whatever you're saying, because that has to do with your own biases and your own fears. Now, this assumption, Aaron is a 27-year-old African American who is beginning his first job after receiving his master's in degree. He has experience through his internship, through graduate work. He's going to be conducting psychosocial assessments and some individual sessions. His clients are randomly assigned to him. He's told his first client is a Caucasian male who is self-referred due to depression. The intake coordinator goes on to tell him that he has a shaved head and a tattoo of swastika on the back of his neck. Prior to seeing the client for the first time, Aaron rearranges his office to make sure he has an escape route and reviews the agency's safety plan. He reviews the client's history, which includes being raised by a father who was a member of an Aryan Nations white supremacist group. On the first meeting, the client Aaron feels frightened and apprehensive. He does not address any of these issues with the client. So the therapist's assumptions are going to now impact this client because you just assume certain things, and that is something we have to be careful of. Now, what assumptions has Aaron made about this client? Think about it and you can make a note of it. What personal beliefs may be challenged for Aaron in this situation? What steps could he have taken to ensure the best care for the client? Now, this one is from the client's view. The client Mark never felt he fit in with his father's beliefs and values. When Mark met his current girlfriend, she had a positive influence on him in exploring his own values. He attempts to be unbiased and open in his approach to all people. Mark detects Aaron's discomfort, and during the third session, he confronts Aaron about his apparent fear and lack of discussing with Mark what his actual values might be. He continues telling Aaron that he does not believe he can help him due to his inability to explore these issues and the assumptions that Aaron has made about Mark. Has there been any ethical violations on Aaron's part? You tell me. Has he possibly harmed the client, and if so, how? So he made these assumptions without even talking to the client. We cannot afford to do that. We have to make sure we understand what is happening with the client. So the steps for Aaron would be to seek supervision prior to seeing the client, to discuss his, we state their own fears and biases in supervision, to discuss the client's background and values with the client from beginning, and to inquire about the client's comfort level in working with Aaron. So we cannot make these types of assumptions. We have to give the person a chance, and then if you have a challenge, then you be upward with the person, as we mentioned in the last class, that honesty, genuineness is important. It's important. And so we need to know our values, and if we realize there is a conflict, we need to be aware of this and aware of how to deal with it. Now, this slide was done by Frances Patterson. She has a PhD and she works with Footprints. He or she, sorry, I'm not sure. But Footprints Consulting Services. I want to give full credit to Dr. Frances Patterson from Footprints Consulting Services. We will continue with our topic on personal values and the counseling relationship, as you have the slide, so you know it's not finished, but we will do the rest another time. Thank you very much for listening, and remember that your values are important to you and they are important a part of who you are. So make sure we don't impose them on the client, and make sure we do our best to put forward our best selves. Thank you very much. I am Rosette James Smith, and please note that this will also be used for our personal growth and development classes. Have an awesome time learning.